rock and roll. Cool. Getting that going. All right, team, let's start. Level 3 chem. Yeah. Let's start. All right, so the reason why I want you guys to do mind maps is one, I want to assess your prior knowledge on climate change because then it helps me know where I need to start my lesson at, so I know what you guys already know. The other reason why I wanted to do this as a beginning activity is because I want to start teaching you guys the importance of using mind maps as a revision tool. So here we have one that has the climate change, and we see some things that are offshoots of that. Natural disasters, too much carbon dioxide, a result of human activity, it's negative. Shifts in our weather pattern, climate change, of temperature after a long period of time. So there's all these little bits of information here. Here is another one. We have climate change, it's talking about global warming, higher sea levels, negative to the environment, moody weather, heat waves, affects the animal life cycle, which it does because the temperatures influence its hormones release and like what kind of environmental input that kind of tells it then to do certain things. Growth of populations are decreasing, environmental disasters. Then we have another one here. It says ozone, causes, we have a list here. Shifts in temperature, greenhouse gases, and weather. Some of the things we talked about in this one. This one over here has lots of little bits of information talking about fossil fuels, cyclones, harm for the future, plants and animals, protests, things like that. Did we figure out what the light is? Oh, now it's off. Alarm? Molly moths. Hold on. Yes, they are. I've seen them. Pause the recording. I just haven't unpacked my boxes yet, which is not very helpful, I know. All right, cool. So this one here, we have this one here, similar sort of ideas. Weather is crap for humans. Pollution's a key factor. Rising sea levels, killing my baby sharks. Animals are going extinct, like the polar bear. Xander, you're getting blamed for it. And then there's this one here, which just has lots of kind of like ideas and like sentences, which is not exactly what a mind map is, but I want to teach you guys how to use a mind map properly. And Caleb has some great ideas like building a dam or genetically modifying ice, which if he knew biology, water does not have DNA. But anyway, mind maps are a really good revision tool, but you need to be using them well. So, lots of information on these mind maps, but if I was thinking about achieved merit or excellence level thinking, what sort of thinking level do you think this is right now? The stuff that you guys have. It's achieved. I'm not going to lie, and the reason why it's achieved is because you're just listing out a lot of facts. So you look at some of these, like this one, listing out facts. There is some linkage here, because now you're saying animals go extinct like the polar bear. So that is now starting to give me a little bit more depth in it. This one over here, lots of information, but there's no connection between these ideas. This one over here is a bit better because it talks about the causes and it's giving me some list of the causes. So you see how that's a slightly better use of a mind map than just giving me these as like separate floating ideas. So just as something to keep in mind, mind maps are really good to help you organize your thought process. I do suggest when you guys are learning material to make mind maps, in particular if you're doing the thermochemistry, highly recommend the mind maps just to make sure you have the ideas of the different types of solids and things like that. So for example, what I could have set up differently is I could set up this as climate change. You're fine. And what I could do then is that is my big thought bubble, is climate change. What I could do is then like an arrow going inward to show causes. So what causes climate change? And then I can have little bubbles coming off of it, like deforestation, burning fossil fuels. Causes. I could also go, okay, climate change, what are the effects? And we can split these effects into two groups. We can think about the effects to life versus the effects to the planet. Oops, I'm starting plant. So for example, the planet, we're going to get increase in temperature, or change in temperature, we say, because it's not always increasing in temperature. In general, we see an increase in temperature. We can talk about how there's extreme weather. We can also talk about, life being affected. So we can see that the animals are dying off and things like that. We can also connect these things together. So like the extreme weathers and the change in temperature, that could affect life because now they're no longer able to reproduce and things like that. So you see how you can make a mind map much more meaningful if you actually tie your ideas together and you're starting to make it a little bit messy and showing things connecting together. This will help you think extended abstract. So I do highly recommend mind maps are a really good revision tool or a really good learning tool. So in particular, when you guys are thinking about this essay in particular for ocean acidification, it is worthwhile doing a mind map before you start writing your essay so that way you can see all the different moving parts to ocean acidification because it is quite a complex process. Are we okay with that so far? All right, moving on. Okay, cool. I'm just going to pause the recording and we're going to move on to the next one. Can I delete my little face? My little face go. Oh, I think by closing that box, I lost the face that I was making. Oh, you start recording. I don't want to stop and start again. It's okay. We just want my face in the remainder of it. That's fine. Alrighty. So Xander got the right answer. What did you notice about these equations that are different from the other ones that we've seen before? I'll go back to that screen. You can reverse it. So just as something that you guys have been seeing in chemistry is we usually, up to this point, we've only shown you the equations with one arrow in one direction. What that kind of implies is that the reaction only goes in one direction. And it goes into that direction until completion. In reality, the vast majority of chemical reactions do not do that. And in fact, they are reversible. And what happens is they reach this point of equilibrium. So the chemical reactions appear to have stopped because the forward and the backward reaction are occurring at the same rate. So you don't notice an absorbable difference, but it's still occurring, the reaction. So why is this important in ocean acidification? Well, in ocean acidification, we do have that reversible reaction. So you see here, there's the double-sided arrow, double-sided arrow, double-sided arrow. All that's trying to communicate to you is that this reaction is reversible. So it can go in this direction, make carbonic acid. It can go backwards and go back to carbon dioxide and water. Same thing. You can go this way to form bicarbonate and the hydrogen ion, releasing that hydrogen ion to make things acidic, or goes in the other direction. I will pause the recording because it sounds like you want to talk to them. Oh, my face again. So the moment I X out my face is gone. Good to know. All right. So, and then this one here, the bicarbonate can become carbonate, and then have the two hydrogen ions going. So this is just telling us that the reactions can go forward and backwards. Are we okay with that so far? All right, so that's the first thing we got to keep in mind. I will be teaching you guys some concepts about equilibrium as well. That's going to be next term. But basically with equilibrium, we're talking about the balance between the forward and the backwards reaction. At this point, I just want to talk about ocean acidification and that as a key concept. So what you have to remember with climate change is that climate change is the result of carbon dioxide being added to our air. And with that, we are going to increase the greenhouse effect of the carbon dioxide. So basically, our atmosphere is like a warm blanket on Earth, which is really important because we do need to have a certain temperature to sustain life. If you look at Mars, for example, they do not have much of an atmosphere, and so they're not able to keep warm, and so Mars is really, really cold. If you look at Venus, on the other hand, Venus has a runaway greenhouse effect. They have too much atmosphere, too much carbon dioxide, and they have too much of a greenhouse effect where that light is getting trapped inside the light and that heat energy is getting trapped inside our planet. Just like a greenhouse in like the normal setting. Like you can use a greenhouse to grow plants in winter because the greenhouse keeps the warmth in and it affects the climate. So same thing is happening. Carbon dioxide is being released into the air. We're going to get changes in our temperatures, which then have downstream effects to change our climate and result in more storms and things like that. The other thing that happens with climate change that's often not heard about is ocean acidification. So just curious, has anyone heard of that as a worry? No. It doesn't often come up. So the thing about ocean acidification, let me show you what happens. And I want to get some beakers and an indicator. So just give me a sec to find those. Get recording. All right. So what I have is some water in my bottle. I got this water from the staff room, just filling it up. And what we want to do is basically see what happens when we add carbon dioxide to the water. And basically we're making just bubbly water. Why is it flickering now? Stop doing that. With my soda stream, you guys can see in the back that I have a gas cylinder in there, so that's going to be acting as our carbon dioxide. Think about the carbon dioxide as being trapped. So carbon as an element is often trapped in fossil fuels and in coal and bio waste and things like that. It is flicking and it's annoying me. Is it annoying you? Stop doing that. All right, so before we have excess carbon dioxide, we just have our normal water. So let me just put that in the beaker, and I'm going to put some indicator in there. Here's our nice tap water, nothing fancy. Litmus to then figure out pH. Should probably put less in there. Some water. Swirl it around. All right. Put a bigger squirt in there. There you go. All right, so we can see our litmus. It's kind of turning that bluish color. So it should be green, ideally, but it's not. So I don't know why we have a more basic water than should be. I might grab some other water from the taps to make sure. See what this one does. Maybe the litmus isn't working. All right, well, I'm going to carbonate and see what happens. Interesting. Be turning greenish. That's fine. Let's carbonate the water and see what happens. Move it out. All right, so when I carbonate the water, what I'm trying to do is I'm going to force carbon dioxide in there like I'm adding excess carbon dioxide into the air by burning fossil fuels. I'm just going to make sure get a lot of dioxide in there. There we go. Now it's happy. It's the noise of it's been carbonated. Yeah, put quite a bit of carbonated. So I put the carbon dioxide. It's basically like the ocean. So the ocean is what's known as a carbon sink. It can take in a lot of carbon dioxide, which is really, really good for us because it removes the carbon dioxide from the air. That's great, right? Less carbon dioxide in the air. What that means is that hopefully less global warming and less increase in the global temperatures. Yeah? But there's a downside to that, and the downside is that we're acidifying the water by doing that. Here's my bubbly water. Now, in theory, there you go. It's turned red. All I did was bubble it. I did nothing else to it. I didn't add any acid to it. I just bubbled the water. So this is part of the reason why when you drink sparkling water, to be like, I'm being better, I'm not choosing to drink Coke or sodas, which is good. Like, it is better for you than sodas, but it still can actually damage your teeth because there's acid in here, carbonic acid. So that's the downside to what's happening. So it's great that the ocean is a carbon sink and it's taking in the carbon dioxide, so that way we don't have as much global warming and we don't have as thick of a blanket. But on the downside is our oceans are becoming acidic, which is causing other problems as well. So these are things we gotta think about. That's why when you drink soda water, you'll notice that it tastes a little bit tart. That's because of it has carbonic acid in there. So I'm happy if anyone wants to try it just to know what it tastes like. What else did I want to add about it? I think that's more or less it. It has a bit of a sour taste to it. When I was younger, my younger cousins called it spicy water because it tasted spicy to them because they weren't used to the bubbles. That's what children call it. Yeah. So it makes a carbonic acid, and the carbonic acid is the sour tasting to it. So that's what I mean by tart. It's a sour taste. Let me wash my hands and go over the notes to explain why I've done that. So yeah, sparkling water, better choice than soda. Not as good as normal plain water, because if you just drink normal plain water, you wouldn't have any acids in there. Might grab a new piece of paper. I want someone else to use that one. All right, so what has happened in what I was doing with that demonstration is that I had carbon dioxide in the gas cylinder. I had water, which was in my bottle, and then I force the carbon dioxide into my water to make bubbly water. By doing that, I then form carbonic acid, which is this product here, and that carbonic acid can dissociate to make the hydrogen ion free. So keep in mind, things are only acidic if the hydrogen ion is free. The moment the hydrogen ion is locked away in here, it's not going to be acidic anymore. This is a reversible reaction, so it can go forward and backward, and it's going to be influenced by things like concentration and temperature and pressure and things like that. So then I have the carbonate, and then this can further dissociate to remove a second hydrogen ion and then make, bicarbonate. And then it can further dissociate to make another hydrogen ion and carbonate. Now, carbonate's really, really important because carbonate is great at neutralizing acids for us. So in our ocean, what we have is calcium carbonate. Calcium carbonate is found in the shells of marine species. So for example, shellfish and coral and things like that. That all has carbonate in there as their structure, which is really, really great. The problem is the moment we start acidifying the water, what's going to happen is that this carbonate is going to disassociate from the calcium, and it's going to interact with the hydrogen ion instead of the calcium ion, forming bicarbonate. Because what it's trying to do is it's trying to neutralize the acid that's being added. When it does that and it forms bicarbonate, this can no longer be used in shellfish. So now the shellfish won't be able to keep their shells in order. And so that's the big problem with ocean acidification. One is that the ocean is becoming more acidic, but two, it is then affecting the carbonate concentrations, which is what the shellfish need to build their shells. So that's kind of the crux of what you're thinking about for this internal is how does this affect other things downstream in the ocean? Are we okay with that so far? All right. So some things to think about. I have two images here. I will talk about these notes more when we're unpacking how things break down and stuff like that. But here is just an image. We have the late 1800s, and our ocean was just over 8 as its pH. And you can see that the carbon dioxide was going to go into the water. It did form carbonic acid. It did release hydrogen ions, and luckily there were carbonate ions that were present that were then going to neutralize it to form carbonate. Bicarbonate or hydrogen carbonate is the other word we use for it. There were still enough carbonate ions around so that way our corals and shellfish and things like that could still build their shells. So it was fine back here. Then, now we're projecting for 2100. So, what are we on? 80 years from now. You can see that the pH is now dropping. Now, it doesn't seem like a major drop because it's just going from like just above 8 to just below 8. But you have to remember that the pH scale is logarithmic. It's not a linear scale. It's actually factors of 10. So this is actually telling us that it's getting quite a bit more concentrated when it comes to the hydrogen ions. So it's losing, it's normally a bit basic, but now it's starting to get more and more to neutral, which in our case is acidic and acidifying. So you see here it's going to carbonic acid. It has the free ions. There are fewer carbonate ions because it's trying to neutralize this excess hydrogen ions that weren't there before. And because there's less carbonate ions, we have fewer and smaller marine animals, which again is going to be problems down the line because we have to think about the food chains and stuff like that. So the big question is, where is all this carbon coming from? Because we can't create or destroy matter. Where did all this carbon come from if we didn't? We can't make it. Where'd it come from? From factories? Getting there? So, something to keep in mind when we are talking about ocean acidification is the carbon cycle. So, we have not created more carbon. We have not destroyed carbon because matter cannot be created or destroyed. What has happened is it has changed forms. So, for billions and billions of years, most of our carbon was locked away in things like fossil fuels and dead decaying matter. So when we die, our carbon's locked unless we start burning it. All right? So that was where it was. It was most of our carbon was not in the atmosphere. It was in a solid state. And in the previous sense, before we started burning fossil fuels and stuff, the main way that carbon dioxide got into our atmosphere was through volcanic eruption, because that would release a lot of carbon dioxide into the air. And we have seen in periods of time during the Earth's history that there has been periods when we've had big volcanic activity, and then in the flip side, we've had also then increased temperatures in the Earth because of the two things correlating together. It was a really delicate balance. Then you can see in this, the carbon dioxide in the air can start exchanging with the oceans and start being our carbon sink to remove that carbon dioxide from the air or release it depending on how things are balancing at the moment. So when I talk about the carbon cycle, I wanted to pick this picture here because I don't want you guys to think that it has to go in a set order. It's all these interchanging systems that are occurring at once. Now, the big problem is, and then we have things like photosynthesis, which is taking the carbon dioxide in the air and locking it into a sugar so that way it's no longer in the air. So lots of things have happened to kind of result in climate change. The big thing is that we had the Industrial Revolution, which resulted in a lot of the burning of the fossil fuels. And because we're burning a lot of those fossil fuels, we are now unlocking all the carbon that was here into our atmosphere. So instead of it being locked away in a solid form and not causing us problems, it's now in the air, in the gas form, causing us problems. So the question is, how do we get this carbon dioxide, this carbon in the air, back into a state that is not going to cause us a problem anymore? So that's something to keep in mind, and that's what you're going to think about for future solutions. Something else to keep in mind is with the living things, with the plants, there's a lot of deforestation that's occurring. And with the deforestation, we are removing the plants that are then able to lock the carbon. The other thing to keep in mind is that the oceans are really important for locking away carbon, not just because of the fact that it's a carbon sink, but also because there's a lot of plankton and kelp and things like that that are greenery in the ocean that can then also lock away the carbon dioxide as well. So lots of kind of things to keep in mind. The thing you're going to find challenging about this assessment is that there's lots of moving pieces. And because these equations are reversible, you can influence these equations and how they're going to behave. So that's why I said we will be doing lessons on the different types of acids, and we'll do a lesson on equilibrium so you guys can understand how are things shifting and how can we manipulate things to do things that we want. But currently, the big problem is we are making too much carbon dioxide, and the downstream effect is that it's going into our oceans as well as into our skies. The focus of this internal is not climate change. It is specifically the ocean acidification half of climate change. Okay? What else did I have to add about that? That's more or less it. Some history behind it. So initially we weren't too worried about the releasing of the fossil fuels when we started burning them, because the thought process was, the ocean will be the carbon sink and will take away the carbon dioxide, will be fine. They also thought that with the weathering of the rocks, that would release carbonate into the oceans, and that would be enough to balance the carbon dioxide that we were releasing in the air. That was obviously not correct. We overestimated how much the system can take, and we've very much abused it. And that is why we're in the boat that we are in. And that's why I'm very much pro knowledge of indigenous and other cultures, because indigenous cultures in particular were very mindful of this delicate balance of the ecosystem and the planet, and you can't keep taking and taking and taking and taking from the planet. Unfortunately, Europeans, we don't understand that, and we just kept burning and burning and burning and burning all this fossil fuel and deforesting and like chopping down trees and stuff without any thought process of that the earth itself is like a living organism, and we have taken way too much from it for it to be able to survive. So now we're in a very dire consequence of trying to reverse the damage that has been done. And the other big challenge you're going to face is that this is a global issue, not a country by country issue, and that the bigger players like the United States and China, if they don't make changes, it's no matter what the Pacific Islands do, they're going to be the ones that are going to experience the worst effects of climate change. So the reason why I'm pointing these things out is because when you guys are doing this internal, we are also trying to hit on the Earth and Space Science Standard, which is all about impact. So let me just pull it up so you guys can see it. Just mindful of the time. So it's a cool topic. I hope you guys like it. Just pull up the internal. So like I said, I'm trying to hit 2 internals with this. The first one is going to be your chemistry topic. So today's lesson, you should be able to talk about identifying and describing the process of ocean acidification, and you should also have the equation at this point, so you can do these to achieve stuff. We've also talked about the carbon cycle and how that links in. So those are the 3 points that I've hit today. I will hit a couple of the other points as well. When you look at the Earth and Space Science Standard, you see how they focus more on having a personal response. And it also talks about like how does it impact individuals in society, explaining your personal response, that sort of stuff. So that is the kind of key difference between the chemistry versus the Earth and Space Science Standard, is that you're taking what you've learned in this one and basically kind of formulating opinions on it. So that's why I talk about how, you know, it's a global issue. Pacific Islands are going to be the most affected by it. All right. So this is going to be a depressing topic. It's going to make you feel sad, but hopefully it makes you guys feel inspired to make some change. And the great news is you guys are year 13s. You guys should be turning 18 this year, so you can be able to vote, and you can vote for groups that will actually do something about climate change. Yeah, enroll to vote.